Hi, everyone. I have mental performance coach Brock McCormack on back with us today. He was on 2 previous episodes. And this episode is all about the throwing yips in baseball and softball. But actually, if you have the golf yips, it will apply a lot there too. We can use examples for both. But Brock is so great to help us break this topic down because he actually had them himself as a pitcher. So he knows firsthand what it's like. And we both have helped tons of ball players get out of the yips. Our old mentor had a great program for the yips. So first, we're going to break down what they are, get Brock's experience with them, and then we'll dive into some strategies that athletes can use. But as a disclaimer, everything we're saying here is more general. So to help an athlete with the yips, it truly is a case-by-case basis. Everybody is so different, but hopefully some of the applied strategies we talk about today will still help. So Brock, I'm going to hand it over to you. First of all, introduce yourself to the listeners who maybe didn't hear our other 2 episodes. And then can you start us off by just trying to explain what the yips are as we start to chip away at this very complex topic?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on, Georgia. I am the owner of Mac Mental Performance. Me and Georgia worked together previously. She branched off, started Rooted. I just branched off and started Mac Mental Performance. And I was a collegiate baseball pitcher. And my freshman year of college, I got kind of struck with the throwing yips and got thrown for a loop, obviously affecting, not only my performance on the field, but affecting, my overall confidence, self-image. The yips can definitely affect a lot more off the field too, and really take a toll on our enjoyment of our sport as a whole too. So we'll kind of talk about some of those side effects and kind of how to be cognizant of those. But just to kind of give a little bit of background on the throwing yips in general is, one of the things that I think is a common misconception is that we kind of lose our talent, or that like we lost it, or, I don't have it anymore. But I think a good reminder is that, our ability doesn't disappear when we have the throwing yips. It's more our trust that disappears. So it's good to remind ourselves that our body is still capable of making these throws and still competing, but it's just our mind that's interfering. So one of the other things too that we want to differentiate is that don't be quick to just label yourself with the yips because you're not pitching well, for example, or, oh, well, I haven't played well, or I'm not throwing well right now, oh, I have the yips, right? Don't just label yourself with that initially without kind of really understanding what's behind it first, because that's not a label that you want to give yourself, right? That's not going to really make you feel any better about yourself as an athlete. So the biggest difference to me is like someone who's just struggling to perform well, that's more something we can tackle with like basic mental skills, like just general underperformance. But the thing with the yips is like, it's almost like a complete loss of control. Like for me personally, I couldn't even play catch with someone 30 feet from me. I couldn't even make a simple throw to their chest, right? The ball would fly over their head. It would go into the ground. That's when I knew something was up. I was like, this is not physical anymore. Like I know how to make a 30-foot throw. I've been doing it since I was 5. Something's off. And that's when we can really start to dive into things with the yips is, all right, what is actually getting in the way mentally of me making like the easiest throw of all time? So what have you seen, Georgia? What have you seen with like throwing yips athletes that kind of relate to that just like sudden, like what's going on moment?
Yeah, well, to build off of what you're saying is it usually comes in the simplest, easy throws. You know what they say in basketball, like an open layup is the hardest shot because, well, yeah, it's easy and you should be able to make that. But like what you're saying, I've worked with so many catchers who have the yips, and it's not their throwdowns that they're struggling with. It's the easy throw back to the pitcher that they're struggling with. And most athletes can usually pinpoint to some sort of like dramatic, traumatic moment. So a lot of times with catchers, maybe they overthrow their pitcher and then somebody steals a base and scores off of that overthrow. And that is such an awful feeling for them that now they're thinking, oh my gosh, I can never do that again. And so now they're playing to avoid overthrowing, and it results in this like weird loopy throw, or maybe they're spiking it every time and they're just overthinking the outcome so much. So it's usually the simple throws when they actually have time to think about it. That's again not the case with everybody, but even in golf, right? It's the simple 2-foot putt where there's this sudden loss of control and they feel like they can't even putt anymore.
Yeah.
And just to give the listeners like a more, I guess, research-based definition, it's often referred to as a performance block that's characterized by sudden loss of fine motor control. And there's many layers to help with it. So there's layers from using physical resets, like maybe even just changing your grip as like a positive distraction, to really deep clinical interventions. But first, we really need to process the distressing event. And I'm curious, Brock, like, was there a moment for you where you really noticed it, or did it just kind of happen slowly over time?
Yeah, that's a good point. I do think a lot of the times it does kind of come from that traumatic moment with athletes. That's not always the case, but a lot of the times it can just come from pressure, right? It can come from, just putting either a lot of pressure on yourself to have to be perfect or live up to expectations, or feeling pressure from coaches, parents, teammates, recruiting pressure. That's always a big one. And that's really what happened to me. It happened in the fall of my freshman year in college. And I think I was just putting a ton of pressure on myself. I need to prove myself, right? Like I need to earn playing time. I need to show everyone that I belong here. Like these are very common thoughts that can pop up in big moments when we're on a new team, or when we're playing in big games, is that pressure and that self-talk of feeling like, we have to play a certain way could be a trigger to the yips. And that's kind of what showed up to me, was feeling like, I had the weight of the world on my shoulders to try to earn playing time in college. And that actually just led me to not play well at all. It caused the reverse effect. So that's one of the, biggest things that we like to, target with the yips, is trying to, take the pressure off and just, go back to doing less instead of trying to do more. Really, like trying harder when we have the throwing yips actually causes more tension. So that's one of the difficult things is, when this starts to show up and we're, really getting really tight and trying to actually over control the throws, it can get worse. So one of the things we do, that I like to do with my athletes is get them to try to do less and simplify.
Yeah. And I was going to ask, when you were a pitcher and you were experiencing this, did you try any like physical remedies, like throwing harder, practicing longer, and just more hours, more pitches? And maybe how did that backfire for you?
Yeah, all of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I threw the entire kitchen sink at it because I was like, I thought that I could outwork it. That's one of the biggest misunderstandings is, oh, I can outwork it. Or, if I stay after practice and throw and throw and throw, that it'll go away. And it doesn't.
Yeah.
That's
And
a
right. And I think like a lot of athletes who finally come to see professionals who can help them, it's like, okay, you know that you are fully ready to dive into what the actual solution could be, because it's not physical, it's definitely mental. And going back to what you were saying, Brock, about the label of the yips, like that's not a term to use loosely. Just because you have a bad throw, we don't want to say, oh my gosh, I have the yips. No, you probably don't. It's just a bad throw. But if you actually have the yips, sometimes just naming that out loud can be really helpful because you're finally owning it. And a big piece of why the yips can be so hard is the embarrassment piece. I've worked with so many coaches before who are like, oh my gosh, no, we can't say the yips. It's like a bad word. Well, and that just makes it worse because now you're like being dramatic and, oh my gosh, it's like a disease that people have. No, it's not. But when you own it, like, yep, I have the yips, automatically that takes this embarrassment piece off the table. You own it, you're holding yourself accountable to it. It's not as scary when you name it, right? It's like, okay, this is what I have, and now we can really start working through it. So the first piece is what you're saying is we got to break it down to the basics, but then we also need to own it, the fact that you might have the yips, and that way it's not this like big, scary, overwhelming thing.
Totally. Yeah. Sometimes it just helps to just face it. And another way that I kind of like to, talk about the yips with some athletes that like don't like to use that word is just like it's a trust problem, right?
Yeah.
It's just like I just have a trust problem. And because, if we really want to get to the core of understanding the yips, kind of like you mentioned, that clinical explanation is like our brain isn't trusting our body to do what it knows how to do. That's kind of the simplest way I like to break it down. And it's not that simple, like in reality, but sometimes it helps to just put it that way for the athletes. Like, hey, our body still knows how to perform, but we have to train our brain in order to get back to getting comfortable doing what we know how to do best. So that would be, probably the biggest thing that I work on with my Yips athletes and that I found success in is being able to build up your confidence in low pressure situations. Is if you continue to throw yourself into these high stakes moments like, oh well, I'll get through it, and then you just go and pitch in another game and it gets worse. And then you pitch another game and it's like, all right, I lost all my confidence and all my feel for my pitches. It's like, I know it's not the most enjoyable thing, but sometimes we do have to take a step back, right? For me, it was like, I'm going to take 2 weeks off of pitching. And it's like, well, that's scary, but it's what you need to do. Is like, sometimes it's okay to take a step back and it's like, all right, I need to build up my confidence on the side, which playing catch with a friend, it's throwing into a net, right? It's throwing bullpens. Like, I need to sometimes step away from the moment. And that's not saying for everybody, but sometimes you need to step back and just build up your confidence in smaller settings first.
Yeah. And maybe even jump into a new position and remind yourself what it's like to have fun in your sport and playing and learning a new position. That way it takes the pressure off of your main position, like what you're saying. And before we get into that trust piece, Brock, I do want to go back to something important that you said, because a lot of athletes we see is when the yips happen, it can be in this transition period. So maybe they're starting a new team where they feel like they have to prove themselves. They're going from high school to college. And like what you said, you were thinking, oh my gosh, I have to prove myself. I have to be perfect. But those thoughts probably never showed up for you in high school. And same thing with our athletes that we're working with. They're putting all this pressure on themselves. But when they were pitching their best or catching and throwing their best, they were never having those more outcome focused thoughts of worrying about where the ball was going to go. Right. So can we dive into that piece a little bit as to how being so outcome focused can really harm their throws and what they can do to start being a little bit more process focused? Because I think that ties right into the trust piece too.
Definitely. Yeah. I think when we focus on the big picture, outcomes, results, pressure, it all just creates fear, right? It's just all fear of, what if I don't, it's the what if thoughts, right?
Yeah.
It's the, what if it doesn't go the way I wanted it to? What if my coach doesn't believe in me? What if my teammates don't think I'm good? Like, so outcomes create fear, fear creates tension, tension in the body. And now we're getting into the dangerous territory there. So the flip side, like you mentioned, is how can we stay locked in on trusting what got us here? That's what I always like to say is stick to what got you there, right? Like you don't need to change who you are as a player just because you're on a new team. You want to stick to, what you've been doing consistently for the last, several months and several years because it works, because that's your process. So sticking to what got you there. And then also just reminding yourself that, you're not there to prove yourself to anyone else. You should be there playing because you want to play good for your love of the game, right? Is when we focus on our passion and our love for the game and our desire to grow as a player, that's a lot more enjoyable than feeling like we have to light up the scoreboard for other people's view of us. Because at the end of the day, they don't really care as much as we like to think that they do. So it's good to remind ourselves that, yeah, other people are watching, but at the end of the day, they're really focused on what they're doing more than they're focused on what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So finding that perspective, that reality check is important. And then what I'm hearing you say is shifting your focus to just your process. And a lot of times you and I will help them break down exactly what that process is, whether it's just, hey, hit them in the chest, trust my release. I read it. This was years ago, and I need to go back and find the study. But it was a very interesting study that this sports psychologist did. And he called it the love drill. And he was working with a couple of pitchers who had the yips. And he put them in like this experiment, basically, where they had a teammate that was running hill sprints or doing push-ups, this insane conditioning. And he had to hit his target to get his teammate to stop doing this. And it was very interesting. The pitcher at first was, throwing his yippy throws everywhere, overthrowing, spiking, and his teammate was like working really hard, got to like this point of exhaustion. And the pitcher was thinking, I have to help my teammate get him out of this. And he just starts like hitting the target, but his focus completely shifted to himself, me, oh my gosh, my mistakes, to helping his teammate. That focus right there, just taking it off of you, like there's not this huge spotlight on you as most athletes think there is. And then putting it on other people, making my pitcher look good as a catcher, and just, making my catcher's job easier. But you take the focus off of you and you put it on loving and serving your teammates. And that has proven to help a lot of athletes too. So just what you're saying, I found it interesting, just finding a different perspective and thinking a little less about yourself and a little bit more about other people. Because typically when you have the yips, a lot of our focus goes very internal on me, my throws, my mistakes. What are other people thinking about?
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, it's a perspective issue. The yips is a attention problem. At the end of the day, it's where our attention goes that makes the biggest difference. And one of the dangerous places that our attention can go is on our mechanics. That's something that I saw show up a lot was, going back to my initial point, I can outwork this. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I just need to spend more time thinking about my mechanics and doing more film breakdown and doing more drills and, getting more opinions. And at the end of the day, that just made it worse, right? As I was trying now too hard to solve a problem that really wasn't even there, for example. So the attention going internally onto our mechanics can actually make the throwing yips even worse. So one of the things that I always like to work on with my catchers that you said is taking your attention away from your mechanics, away from your arm, and putting it out into your target, right? Put your focus out into an objective, a mission, which is, focusing on the logo on the pitcher's hat and focusing on just getting it there instead of, I need to get my elbow in this position and, do this with my arm. Let's just focus on the task at hand, which is get the ball back to the pitcher. And I do that the best when I'm just focused on letting it happen instead of trying to make it happen.
Yeah, building off of what you're saying, the attention problem, right? With all those what ifs, I think a lot of times their attention goes to the outcome or the mistake. And so it's helpful too to break down that worst case scenario. Okay, you overthrow or you spike it. What's the worst possible thing that can happen? And then how are you going to handle that? Because baseball is a very interesting sport. There are backup plans for nearly every single situation, right? Pitchers cover home or first base. I mean, in the outfield, they're all shifting to help cover each other. And that's because those things happen all the time. So there needs to be a plan B for that. So I think like breaking down that worst case scenario. And then you're right with the mechanics. I think baseball and golf are very, very technical sports. So it's so easy for those athletes to resort and think about their technique and mechanics. But that's really just the wrong approach to take. But that's usually like plan A for most of them.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think really the biggest goal when trying to bounce back from the yips is just continuing to get quality repetition without judgment. I think that's kind of the biggest way that I like to put it is getting quality reps in without feeling judgment, whether that's self-judgment, like, man, why am I doing that? Or what's wrong? Or feeling judgment from others, like, what are they thinking about me? Right? That embarrassment factor is a big fuel for the fire with the yips is not only am I disappointed in myself because I'm not performing well, but now I'm worried, man, my teammates definitely think I'm not good anymore. Man, coach isn't going to put me out there anymore. It's now we're just adding even more tension. Whereas our goal is actually the opposite of that, which is get quality reps in without feeling judgment and really just reminding yourself that I still know how to do this.
So what did, Brock, when you were getting back into it, what did a good day look like as you were coming out of the yips? And maybe what did a bad day look like a day with progress? Because with athletes, right, I think it's very important that we always say hey, we aren't looking for 100% great throws right now. We're looking for like maybe 2 good throws today. and that's it. Like we have to really break it down and look at the small wins that are happening. So will you just talk about the uphill climb, like as you're starting to get the hang of it and kind of climb out of it, what did those first couple days and first couple weeks look like?
Yeah, I think celebrating the small wins is super important. I think the things that, I took for granted as an athlete, like playing catch, I am now extremely grateful for, where it's like success now is just having a good day of catch play. And a good day of catch play also means I'm still going to make bad throws. It's accepting that failure is still going to be woven into that. But it's not necessarily just grading my success on like, oh, well, I had 8 bad throws, so it was a bad day. It's like, how well did I trust myself today? Like, how well was I just focused on my target and making a trusting, committed throw through the target instead of, oh, well, let's think mechanics. What's my throwing partner thinking? Is coach watching me? It's how well did I trust myself, right? How well did I focus on my process? How well did I reset after a bad throw, for example? So I'm tracking these smaller objectives and appreciating those more than just like looking at the big picture, like statistics, for example, like, oh, well, I still went out there and let up 4 runs. It's like, no, we got to kind of shrink our focus into those kind of smaller wins first, because that's where we really start to build the confidence up, is in the smaller wins instead of just looking at those big picture results.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had a catcher. I worked with her for years, and she had these really bad throwing yips. And for her, right, I never promised her that her yips were going away. I never promised any athlete that comes in with the yips. I'm like, I can't promise you that these are going to go away forever. They might not. They'll probably come back here and there. But my goal for you is to have a process for when they do come back. And so typically a lot of times for athletes, when they start getting their throw back or their putt back, whatever their yip challenge might be, then they create this expectation like, oh, it should be great now or perfect all the time. And that's not the case at all. It might come back, but the goal is not to have this panic freak out moment when it does. The goal is to have tools like your process, and when you know how to handle it, that you can come back to and feel confident about. So for her catching, sometimes she'd have this weird overthrow when she was throwing it back to the pitcher. Instead of freaking out, we had her on a very specific physical reset and a mental reset. So something that she would shift her focus to and something that she would physically do. And she would do that instead of panic. And then the next throw would be good. So it's really about giving the athletes these tools to be able to handle it themselves versus have this panic freak out moment and asking all these unhelpful questions too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's scary, right? It's scary because you have those flashback moments.
Mm.
That's all it is our brain is, you experience that bad rep and your brain instantly flashes back to all of the pain. Our brain wants to pull back all of those bad feelings and emotions and says, don't do that again, right? I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to feel that way again. So let's not mess up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's those constant reminders that one bad rep doesn't mean we're back to square one. Like Georgia said, progress isn't just measured by the outcome. Progress is measured by our response. And that's really why mental coaching is so important with the Yips. It's because we want to help you create a custom personalized process, because this isn't just like a one size fits all, that your response, your, routine mentally and physically, it's got to be yours, right? So we want to, help you come up with a personalized plan that, can help you tackle this when you get to those kind of like moments, and know how to push past those and remind yourself that it doesn't mean that I have the yips again and everything's ruined.
Right. A lot of it is building awareness, like you're saying, with all those kind of post reflection questions, like where was my attention today before a bad throw, and where was it before a good throw? Or we're figuring out, what are you doing when you're doing really well, and what are you doing when you're not doing so well. And I'm curious, Brock, was there anything that like a coach or teammate or maybe even like a sports psych said to you that really stuck or just resonated and helped you as you were working through the yips?
Yeah. I think probably one of the biggest things that I thought about was that, like, literally nobody cares. that was like, it sounds dumb, but nobody really cares what I'm doing, because my biggest obsession was that everybody was watching me, was that I was just constantly being judged, and that everyone was making fun of me in their heads, and that, no one liked me anymore because I wasn't playing well. So I was just obsessed with kind of the opinions of others. And it actually just helped me to say, like, dude, nobody cares what you're doing. Like, just do your thing, focus on your process and like your practice plan. Like, nobody really cares. And that was just like a simple reminder that I needed to hear that, like, took the pressure off my shoulders and just let me fail. Like, it allowed me to be comfortable failing and messing up and trying things. And it allowed me to be uncomfortable without feeling like I was being judged.
It sounds harsh, but like you're not that special, right? I think a lot of athletes need to hear that. People are not looking at you as much as you think they are. It's that spotlight effect. So I think it's a lot of it is like staying humble, reminding yourself of those truths, finding what works for you. Is there anything else, Brock? I think we've talked a lot about the attention and the trust. Like any specific drills that you would recommend your athletes to come back to really start with the basics? Like, for example, when I'm working with gymnasts who have mental blocks of going backwards on beam, like we literally just start by doing like somersaults backwards, like on the mat, right? What are basic things that maybe these pitchers or throwers could be doing?
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the things I found a lot of success with and that my athletes really like is trying to throw something other than a baseball.
Mm.
Because when we pick up a baseball, our mind is instantly going to go, no.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to be like, geez, here we go again. Don't do that again. But
Mhm.
if we pick up a football, our brain is like, okay, I know how to do this. It's a football. Like, yeah, I've been throwing a football forever. Like, this is, yeah, easy. So now we start to build up that confidence with the football. And it's like, okay, toss him a baseball real quick. All right. Yeah, I can do that. So you kind of mix in like different types of training, like throw with your left arm, right? Throw off balance, like try to different ways of throwing to remind your brain, like, oh, I know how to do this.
Mhm.
That's really what it is. It's just reminding ourselves that we still have the talent. It's just unlocking the talent via repetition and trust.
Yeah. And I would say too, for athletes who, are struggling with the yips right now, the talking through it can be so helpful. Even just finding somebody that can relate, like a role model that you have, go read some articles about some professional athletes who had it and how they got out of it. Right. I think that relatability piece is really important, knowing that you're not the only person that has ever gone through this. There are people that have worked through it before, and you can definitely do it the same.
Absolutely. Yeah. Plenty of good examples out there, even professional players. Daniel Bard is really one of the, storybook kind of examples of MLB pitchers who overcame the throwing yips. So check that one out. But yeah, like you said, talking through this with a mental coach doesn't mean that, you're weak, doesn't mean that there's, like it's the end of the world and that, oh, well, that's just my last resort. I might as well just go talk to a mental coach because I'm broken and my career's over. It's like, no, like it's a little hurdle. And it's like when you get hurt physically, you're going to go see a physical therapist. And that's kind of the same analogy that I use is like, that you kind of have a little bit of a mental injury, so to say. And that's something that we can just do a little mental physical therapy, AKA mental skills to, get you back out there mentally strong. So it's no different than seeing a physical coach.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if it's a trust, attention, and fear problem. Well, your pitching coach isn't probably the expert at those things. So you go see an expert for those things. As we wrap up here, Brock, is there any just last minute pieces of advice, information that you feel like our audience should know? I feel like we've done a good job at kind of chipping away at what it is and some good strategies to help athletes with here.
Yeah, I would just say, you're not alone in the journey. Like there are a lot of athletes that are struggling with this too that won't talk about it. That, is sort of like an unspoken truth. And that, in this journey, there is an opportunity to bounce back from it. I overcame the yips. I was very blessed and fortunate to find a great mental coach who helped me work through it. And there's plenty of success stories. So just having hope. I think hope is the biggest factor in this journey is just that belief that I can get through this and that, there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, I always ask my athletes is do you have hope that you can get through this? If there's a little bit of hope, that's great. We can work with that. So keep the hope going, get a mental coach, try different strategies out that work for you and be patient. It might take a little bit of time to build it back up. So thank you, Brock, for helping us break this complex topic down. A lot of people don't know what the Yips is. And if any listeners have more questions, please feel free to contact me. My email is georgia@rootedsportspsycoach.com. Brock, where can listeners find and reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. My Instagram is Mac Mental Performance, MACK Mental Performance. And my website is macmental.com.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.